Hey guys, welcome back to Dogforge. My name's Paul, and in this entry of the Tierlist feats series, we're going to have a little bit of a mishmash. We have a few books that don't really have enough feats to constitute their own video. So in this, we're going to be going through the feats that can be found in Eberron, the Rising from the Last War, the Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, and Fizban's Treasury of Dragons. So without further ado, let's get cracking. And the order that I just gave you is the order that we'll be progressing through them. So we're going to start off with Aberrant Dragon Mark. This is a half feat. You get to increase your con score by +1. You get a cantrip of your choice from the sorcerer list and a first level spell of your choice from the sorcerer's list. Constitution is your spellcasting ability for those, and you can cast the first level spell once every short or long rest. So straight off the bat, this is pretty interesting. This is one of the very rare instances. I believe the old school Air Genasi also had this, but this is one of the rare instances of getting Constitution as a spellcasting stat, which of course has, if you can actually build into it, which you have very limited capability to do in 5e with what we have, then there's obviously a lot of benefits to that, because if you can just mainline your Constitution, it's going to be super easy to maintain your concentration on spells, and you're going to get a boatload of hit points. And the ways that we have to build into Constitution casting actually aren't class-based. We have this feat and the old Genasi. So you could feasibly play some kind of martial with a higher hit dice, build more into Constitution. Something like a Cavalier fighter would probably work well. And we also have an interesting bullet point here, where when you cast the first level spell, you have the option of expending a hit dice. If you roll an even number, you get a number of temp HP equal to the number you rolled. And if you roll an odd number, one random creature within 30 feet of you, not including you, takes force damage equal to the number rolled. If no other creatures are in range, you take the force damage. So this is a little bit of a risk. Something important to note here is that it says that you are expending your hit dice and you're rolling it. However, at no point does it actually say that you include your Constitution modifier. So depending on what your hit dice is, this is going to be very swingy regardless, but it's also not going to be particularly big numbers. You can obviously weaponize this if you make sure that when you do this, none of your allies are within 30 feet of you. Then you're also going to get the benefit of, hey, temp HP is always great, and we don't have any time duration, so those temp HP will be lasting for up until your long rest. Or if you get the damage and you're making sure your allies aren't within 30 feet of you, hey, free resourceless in terms of action economy damage. This feat it's flavorful. We do have a whole table about Dragon Mark floors to represent the floored mark. Short or long rest, recharge for the spell, +1 Constitution. I'm going to say this is... I'm hovering between B and A. I'm going to go towards A. And my rationale is this: you're going to get the choice to pick a spell from the sorcerer list, which means that not only can you get shield in this way, but you can get shield that you can use multiple times a day without needing spell slots to be spent on it, and that can be very valuable. And then you also get a cantrip from the sorcerer list, which has a wide variety. You can pick up something like Firebolt for damage, Prestidigitation or Mage Hand for utility. So the casting you're getting here is actually fairly potent, but that along with a +1 Constitution, which every character needs, is great, and the fact that you can spend a hit dice to get that variableness can really add into like a chaotic feel. I could see this going really well with a wild magic sorcerer. So I think it's a pretty solid feat overall. Not for everyone, obviously. Next up, we have Revenant Blade, also from the Eberron book, and this has a prerequisite of being some form of elf, which, let's be honest, isn't really that restricting. And is entirely focused on the double-bladed scimitar, and that is a special weapon. So, I'm going to go over the double-bladed scimitar first, just so that you're familiar, and then we'll go over Revenant Blade so you can see how it ties into it. The double-bladed scimitar is a martial weapon. It is special, two-handed, and it's 2d4 slashing. Now, its special property is that if you attack with it as part of your attack action on your turn, you can use a bonus action immediately after to make a melee attack with it. That melee attack does a d4 slashing on a hit instead of 2d4. This is effectively kind of like a built-in polearm master. You're getting that d4 bonus. There's nothing explicitly excluding it, so you would get your modifier to the damage as well. So as you can see, automatically giving you an additional attack is already very strong. Just this as a weapon is very potent. And 2d4 instead of 1d8 is also going to have a... You're not going to be as likely to get the max damage, but you're going to have a higher floor and a higher average roll. So we're already starting on a high base. And then we go to Revenant Blade as an elf. And it's got 3 bullet points. It is a half feat, allowing you to boost your strength or dex by +1. Whilst you are holding a double-bladed scimitar with 2 hands, you get a +1 bonus to your AC, and a double-bladed scimitar has the finesse property when you wield it. So this is a bit of an odd duck, really. This is kind of drawing inspiration, in my opinion, from dual wielding. The dual wielder feat and 2-weapon fighting, with the double-bladed scimitar giving you a bonus action like 2-weapon fighting, and then the feat giving you a +1 to your AC to compensate for not being able to use a shield. The really big thing here, in my opinion, is that it gives it the finesse property. A +1 to AC is nice, but it's not really build defining. The +1 to strength or dex is nice, but really that's just making it easier to pick this feat up. Now, being able to use it as a finesse weapon means that rogues can use this, which is actually pretty significant. So you're going to be able to use your sneak attack if you're a rogue doing this now as a finesse weapon with Revenant Blade. However, the fact that double-bladed scimitar comes with its own bonus action attack means that not only are you just straight up raising your damage as a rogue, but you're also getting another opportunity to land sneak attack if your first attack misses, which is pretty significant. Separately from that, there are a whole bunch of benefits to being dex-based, and being able to use something like this on a dex base is pretty nice. You're obviously going to get the higher dex saves, all of the skills associated, higher initiative. So this is, in terms of the fiction, which I should really address before, the fiction for Aberrant Dragonmark is really well fulfilled, especially with the table it gives for how it's like representing it. In terms of this, I think that this is representing the fiction pretty strongly, actually. The whole image of an elf using a double-bladed scimitar is meant to be incredibly graceful, these whirling blades of death, almost like a dance. And, you know, the finesse property using dexterity really evokes that, whereas the default double-bladed scimitar using strength feels more of a... almost more like Klingon in a sense. You know, there's some style to it, but you are at the end of the day using strength behind the blade. I think just in terms of how it pairs with the weapon, and in terms of the possibilities that it unlocks, particularly for a rogue, and the fact that it is a primary stat half feat, I'm going to put this in A, with the addendum that this is incredibly niche. It is so niche that I was considering putting it in B for that purpose. It only works with one specific weapon that is it's restricting you to being an elf. The proficiency for that weapon is technically only available being a certain kind of Eberron elf, and all of this is Eberron specific. There are some tables that are going to let you buck dive and grab whatever you want from wherever you want, and of course you can be playing in an Eberron world, but this is incredibly niche, and so I'm putting this in A just because if you can take it, and it can be very potent, and it's very easy to fit into your progression. but it's niche enough that it's just about an A, it's bordering on a B. Now, moving on to Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, which gave us a single feat, and it is Svirfneblin magic for the Deep Gnome. It has a prerequisite of being a Deep Gnome, and this is to really bring along the magic that is typically associated with a Deep Gnome as a PC. So this is going to give you the ability to cast non-detection at will, which can be somewhat problematic, we'll talk about that, without needing a material component. And then you can cast Blindness, Deafness, Blur, and Disguise Self each once per long rest, with Intelligence being the spellcasting ability for all of them. And they are all cast at their lowest possible levels. That's explicitly stated, just so you know, if an ability doesn't actually say what you're casting it at, and you're not using your own spell slots to do it, just assume that it's going to be cast at the base level. So, there are a lot of good spells here. Blindness Deafness is a debuff that's valid in different ways at pretty much all levels. Blur, I don't love it as a defensive spell because it's just disadvantage, an action cast, minute duration, concentration. It's kind of in my opinion. Disguise Self is an excellent spell. Non-detection is, I think, a bit more of a niche spell. I don't think it's going to come up that much, so I will actually touch what that spell is. It's a 3rd level abjuration spell. It has casting time of an action and duration of 8 hours. You can only cast it on yourself. The spell itself is a range of touch and normally requires 25 gold sprinkled over the target of diamond dust, and that is consumed. So this would normally be quite a costly spell to cast regularly. So getting that for free and at will on yourself is great, and I think this is the only instance of a 3rd level spell being given in a feat. I could be wrong, but if it's not the only, it's one of the very few. I do think it is the only one, though. Now, non-detection itself allows you to hide the target, so in this case yourself, from divination magic. It cannot be targeted by divination magic or perceived through a magical scrying sensor. Now that's very niche. It's going to come up in some campaigns. If you're playing a campaign with mages as the primary antagonist, it's more likely to come up. But the big thing that normally comes up around non-detection is that it's a 3rd level spell you can cast on yourself at will, and this allows you to, as an abjuration wizard, rapidly recharge your ward very quickly, whenever you want, essentially. Now, that is a incredibly niche use. This is a very niche feat, being not only a racial feat, but a sub-racial feat. But you get a lot of spell casting out of this. A 3rd level spell, just in general, no matter what it is at will, is pretty significant. Blindness, Deafness, and Disguise Self, pretty nice. And whilst I'm not really a fan of it, I know Blur does have its fans. So just in terms of the sheer amount of stuff you get, I'm going to put it in B, but even with that Abjuration Wizard trick, it is just too niche. If you're looking to get more spells, you can just get spells another way. Now, something important to bear in mind is that the Monsters of the Multiverse rework of the Deep Gnome actually incorporated a lot of this magic into the base race. However, nothing is precluding you from taking this feat as a Monsters of the Multiverse Deep Gnome. There's going to be a little bit of redundancy, but ultimately you're just going to give it to be able to cast the spells more. So that is something that you can do if you want to be more Deep Gnomish. Either way. Moving on to Fizban's Treasury of Dragons and the 3 gift feats. As you can see here, I did not feel like typing out dragon at the end of each of these, but the full name is Gift of the Blank Dragon. So starting off with Chromatic. So this is going to be 2 features, no ASI bumps. First one is Chromatic Infusion. As a bonus action, you can touch a simple or martial weapon and infuse it with one of the following damage types: acid, cold, fire, lightning, poison. And for the next minute, the weapon deals an extra d4 of chosen damage when it hits. After you use this bonus action, you can't do so again until you finish your long rest. And reactive resistance. When you take acid, cold, fire, lightning, or poison damage, you can use your reaction to give yourself resistance to that instance of damage, and you can do this proficiency times per day. Now, this is effectively like most of absorb elements, like the useful part of absorb elements, because a lot of the time the infused melee damage of it is not relevant. What they've effectively done is just dissected that as a spell and then turned it into a feat. Getting an extra d4 of damage is nice. This is kind of like Divine Favor in some ways. Divine Favor is a paladin spell that's also available to war clerics. That is also a bonus action for a d4 of damage, but that's radiant. Being able to choose your damage type is actually quite nice, as it's going to allow you to target specific things, such as if you're fighting a troll, obvious example there, you can choose acid or fire to shut down its regeneration, or you can try and dodge resistances or immunities. This is still elemental damage, so you can be put in a tough spot. Like, if you're fighting fiends, then a lot of this is going to be kind of crap. And, lightning is, generally speaking, going to be the most reliable here. The fact that it's a bonus action is great. The fact that you get that reactive resistance proficiency times a day, so it scales up as you're more likely to actually come across that damage. This is a solid feat. Now, I'm going to point out that for the chromatic infusion aspect, you touch a weapon, it does not have to be your weapon, and this is a bonus action. Which means that if you're a caster looking for some absorb elements defense, but maybe you don't get that spell natively, or you don't want to commit your spell slots to it, this is a great way to pick that up and get a supporting feature. So I would actually say this would be great on something like a bard. I know bards can have a busy bonus action, but also saving those first level slots for healing words, dissonant whispers is also pretty nice. This is a very solid feat. I like this quite a lot. I kind of wish that the chromatic infusion recharged on a short or long rest. I don't think that would be out of bounds or too powerful, but I can understand why they did it. So I'm going to put this at B. It's a solid feat. There's no hard feat here, so you are going to have to sacrifice some primary stat progression unless you take it as a custom lineage, variant human, get it as a free feat, or after you've maxed out your stats. And that's primarily what's holding this back, along with chromatic infusion being once a long rest. And you do have the risk of choosing a useless against the monster damage type, unless you fought that monster before, can draw some obvious conclusions or metagame it a little bit. So those are the things kind of holding it back at a B. Moving on next to Gift of the Gem Dragon. Now this is a half feat. It's going to let you bump one of your mentals in Wiz or Charisma by +1. And it's going to give you the telekinetic reprisal feature. You can kind of think of this like a psionic hellish rebuke. So you're going to be able to do this a number of times per long rest proficiency bonus, because they love it. And when a creature within 10 feet of you damages you in any way, it can be aura, attack, save based, doesn't matter, it just has to be damage. You can use your reaction to damage them telekinetically. They must make a strength saving throw. DC is 8, proficiency plus whatever you raised with this feat. On a failed save, it takes 2d8 force damage and is pushed 10 feet away from you. On a successful save, half as much damage and isn't pushed. So, let's break that down. So, there's a lot of potential synergy here, particularly if you're playing a caster or somebody that wants a particular mental stat as a secondary. You can, let's say you're playing a wizard and you want to bump your intelligence, but you also want to add a little something to your character. Hey, here's a new resource. In terms of damage, 2d8 is pretty solid, force is an excellent damage type, and 10 feet away is pretty good. It's a decent amount of movement. Even creatures that have a 10-foot reach, that should in theory push them out so you can get away without attacks of opportunity unless they have more movement on their turn. So what are the downfalls of this? It's targeting strength, that is not always, but is typically a strong monster saving throw, and they have to be within 10 feet of you, making this kind of particularly niche. I would say the ideal use case for this feat is actually going to be something like a ranger, paladin, arcane trickster, eldritch knight. Something where you have a reason to be in melee range to begin with, but you also have a reason to invest in a mental stat. And then that's going to allow you to have a reason to bump a mental stat to begin with. You're more likely to have a DC that's worth a damn. And then you're going to be able to more reliably use and proc this. So just because of the limitations, 10 feet strength, I'm going to put this as a B. Between chromatic and gem, it really just depends entirely on the build, but I personally lean to chromatic being a bit better than gem. But it is ultimately what you're looking for. Now, Gift of the Metallic Dragon is unequivocally good in my opinion. It's going to give you the Cure Wounds spell that you can cast once per long rest for free, but it's going to let you cast it with spell slots as well if you have any. It's going to let you choose the ability modifier that you use with it in Wiz or Charisma. So if you're playing a class that does not typically get Cure Wounds, so let's say you're playing like a sorcerer that's not divine, or warlock that isn't celestial, any kind of wizard, it's going to enable you to cast it, which is quite nice, and then if you can cast it, you can upcast it. It's going to give you a free casting, which is very nice, and it kind of fits in with the overall theme of this. I keep forgetting fiction. That's bad of me. Fiction for Gift of the Chromatic, it's all about being one with the elemental damage. Great. Gift of the Gem, it's all about, gem dragons being more psionic dragons, so you get mental boost and the telekinetic ability. Great fiction. Metallic dragons tend to be more good aligned, tend to have more of a protective role, typically. Not always, but Fizban is surrounded by, dragons of that kind for a reason. And so our second ability, Protective Wings, is great for both you and a friend. When you or another creature you can see, there's a limitation, within 5 feet of you is hit by an attack roll, you can use your reaction to manifest spectral rings from your back from a moment, granting you or the other person, whoever is the target, an AC boost equal to your proficiency bonus against that attack roll. You can use this a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus per long rest. So, reaction, a lot of people are going to immediately think of shield, reaction AC boost. This is actually more like a limited defensive duelist in how it works that you can use for a friend. Now, I've used this feat in practice. I actually used it with a monk, and it was really great. Having that Cure Wounds was a nice way of being able to top up the party when needed. And then that AC boost came in handy both for me and for allies. This is a really good feat in my opinion. The fiction is pretty strong, and then the effect, Cure Wounds with a mental stat you can choose, free cast once a day. I know some people hate on Cure Wounds, it's a solid healing spell. And then Protective Wings scales up with your level, with proficiency bonus, scales up in 2 ways. You or a friend. This is a really good feat in my opinion, and I'm going to put this in A. Now, what is kind of lifting this up above the other gift feats is that it's just a lot less prone to failure. With the Chromatic Infusion, it's only once per long rest, and you could still end up choosing an infused type that just doesn't really do anything, that's resisted or immune, because we don't always know those things. With Gift of the Gem, the Telekinetic Reprisal has quite a few points of failure with strength within 10 feet of you, so those things hold those feats back, but Cure Wounds is always great. Whether you're picking somebody up, topping somebody off in or between combats, the potential to give it to somebody who can't normally cast it's very good. Everyone is going to get hit by attacks from time to time. Reaction boosting your AC is very valuable, and the fact that you can share this and protect a friend potentially, and it is one or the other. You can't protect both at the same time, but you wouldn't need to. It's attacks. It's good. It's all really good, really solid, and I think it's good value for an ASI. Now finally, we're going to magic school, particularly Hogwarts and the sub curriculum, I guess, Strixhaven and the curriculum of bullshit. It is not balanced in the least, but here we are. So Strixhaven Initiate is a feat that is really intended to be taken with the background that comes in Strixhaven Curriculum of Chaos. You are meant to get it for free. That is why the Strixhaven mascot has a restriction of 4th level, so you can't double up and get the background and Variant Human and get both at the same time. So what do you get? So Strixhaven has 5 different colleges. Each college is represented here with different options. And every college is going to give you 2 cantrips from a particular list, and a 1st level spell that you can cast once per long rest or with your spell slots, from one of 2 different lists that you choose from. So Lawhold is going to give you the option of Light, Sacred Flame, or Thaumaturgy, and let you choose from the Clerical Wizard list. Prismari is going to let you choose from Firebolt, Prestidigitation, and Ray of Frost, and allow you to choose from the Bard or Sorcerer list. And Quandrix is going to be Druidcraft, Guidance, Mage Hand, and let you choose from Druid or Wizard. Silverquill, the Bardish one, is going to be Sacred Flame, Thaumaturgy, or Vicious Mockery, and let you choose from Bard or Cleric. Witherbloom is going to be Chill Touch, Druidcraft, or Spare the Dying, and allow you to choose from Druid or Wizard. And because there's so many colleges, I'm going to take a little bit of a water break. Hydration. So, 2 cantrips and a 1st level spell. That is kind of in line with what we expect from Magic Initiate. 2 cantrips, 1st level spell. This is more potent in some ways, in that you can cast the spell with spell slots, which you cannot do with Magic Initiate unless you have levels in that class. And then we're also going to be able to get a different kind of power, because these actually mix spell lists. So if you used Magic Initiate, you pick a spell list and it's what you get. You pick Wizard, you pick cantrips and a spell from the Wizard list. This lets you kind of pick cantrips and a spell from different lists, and that's kind of powerful in its own right. Now let's take a look at Quandrix. Guidance and Mage Hand would not normally go together on Magic Initiate, and then you can choose Druid or Wizard. So if you're doing this and you wanted to kind of pick up a little bit of support, you could do Guidance and Mage Hand, great support and utility, and then go Druid to pick up something like Healing Word or Cure Wounds, or over to Wizard and pick up something like Shield. So whilst they are forcing you to choose from a very limited cantrip list, there is still quite a lot of potency here. I'm going to ignore the fact that this is meant to come from a background when evaluating it, because we're trying to evaluate these as you're trading an ASI. You're getting it as you would get any other feat. So in that light, I think this gives you a solid amount. And I think the ability to choose from different lists can be quite potent. I'm going to put this at A, and what is going to push this over the edge is the fact that you can choose your casting modifier, which you can't with Magic Initiate. It's dictated by the class list, and that you can explicitly use your spell slots, allowing you to cast it multiple times, allowing you to upcast it if you want. So I think that's really the decider for nudging it towards A. I think that it's low-end A. I could see very well arguments for it being B, to be honest. Next up, we have, finally, actually, Strixhaven Mascot. This is a barrel of laughs. So we have 2 prerequisites here, 4th level and the Strixhaven Initiate feat. Now, so we need to bear that in mind. in that we have a lot, like both 4th level and Strixhaven Initiate. It's not a particularly high bar, especially if you're playing in Strixhaven, but it is a lofty prerequisite in the scope of feats as a whole to overcome. So this is going to give you Find Familiar as a ritual. Your familiar can take the form of a mascot associated with the college you chose for Strixhaven Initiate. Now, I'm just going to point out the wording there is it can take the form, so the feat is not precluding you from using Find Familiar in its normal base state, getting an owl or bat or whatever you would like. It's just giving you additional special forms that you can choose from. And those are going to be Spirit Statue Mascot for Lawhold, Art Elemental Mascot for Prismari, a Fractal Mascot for Quandrix, an Inkling Mascot for Silverquill, or a Pest Mascot for Witherbloom. The word mascot has lost all meaning for me. Now we'll dip into what each of those are a little bit. This is kind of where this feat becomes a little bit of a pain as a player, just because you're not evaluating it based on the feat itself, you're evaluating it based on what all of these different stat blocks do. But we have 2 more bullet points. Secondly, you can take the attack action when you take the attack action on your turn, your familiar can take an attack if you forego one of yours, and that consumes its reaction. So if you do that, it cannot deliver one of your touch spells on the same turn unless, changes. This is something that works quite well for marshals, as you are still able to get the other attack from your extra attack. If you're playing a PHB Beastmaster, I guess you could forego both of your attacks and just have your minions attack too, which is kind of neat. And finally, if your mascot familiar is within 60 feet of you, you can teleport as an action, swapping places with the familiar. A little bit benign transposition there. If your destination space is too small for you to occupy, the teleportation fails and is wasted. You can do this once per long rest, but you can expend a spell slot of 2nd level or higher to do it again. So this is kind of Misty Step with extra steps in some way. Now, I will say that this does not require you to see where you're teleporting. It doesn't require your mascot to be able to see. You just kind of swap places, and that can be some value to that if you're caught up in a place you can't see, like a fog cloud, a darkness spell, or you just don't have dark vision and it's dark. This is, having a familiar that attacks is good, especially since you can ritual cast it. Bear in mind that Find Familiar is still going to cost that 10 gold per. So it's really going to come down to the strength of these forms we get. So a Spirit Statue Mascot, that was the Lawhold option. This has a Death Burst. When it's reduced to 0 hit points, it crumbles and the spirit returns to blah 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 fluff. When it explodes, each creature within 5 feet of it must succeed on a DC 12 con save or take a D6 radiant damage. That's pretty terrible. This is a CR a quarter, by the way. So it's only a D6. It's only within 5 feet of it. It's a DC 12, which is nice, but it's also a con save, typically strong monster save. For actions, it has a slam attack +4, range 5 feet for a D6 +2, and it's otherwise got a Council of the Past ability that you can use twice per day, which is essentially kind of like guidance. The statue touches a creature, and once within the next 10 minutes, it can roll a d4 and add the number to an ability check of its choice immediately after rolling the d20. The wording there makes it seem like you might not be able to see the result, like you have to do it straight away, but it's also afterwards, so I can see some DM interpretation there. It's got an AC of 14, 26 hit points, speed of 30 foot, no special movements. It's got Arcana, History, Perception. It's a whole stat block that you can look up online should you want. Actually, you know what? Since we're going through this, why don't we do this? Okay. Let's do this. There we go. So that was the Spirit Statue mascot. Prismari is going to be the Art Elemental. This is going to give you a Death Burst again, but this time within 5 feet it's a DC 11, and it's being blinded instead of damage. The blind lasts a minute. The blinded creature can repeat the save at the end of its turns. Then for actions we have Joyful Flare, which is a +3 melee attack within 5 feet, 2d4 plus 1 fire. Melancholic Bolt, +3 to hit, 30-foot range, 2d4 plus 1 cold. Captivating Artistry is the special ability once per day. So targets one creature it can see within 30 feet of itself. DC 12 Charisma save or be charmed for a minute. Repeat the save every turn. And then we're going to get Immunity to Poison, Resistance to Cold and Fire. It's only going to get a 10 Passive Perception, AC of 11, and 18 hit points. So it is, I suppose I should also mention these sizes. The mascot statue is medium, this one is small. So this is going to be in some ways a squishier, lower AC, lower hit points, but then we've got the resistances and immunities. But you do also have the ranged attack. I do think that Captivating Artistry is very niche. Charmed for a minute. This is a very limited use because it's charmed by the mascot, not you. So that has very limited use for you actually. It's just a little weird. This is not one that I would really advocate for unless you want some extra range damage. But bear in mind that range damage is cold, which can be quite frequently resisted depending on the monster. Fractal, which was Quandrix. This is going to be AC 12, 27 hit points, so we've got a Meteor Boy, 30-foot movement, immunity to poison, has a special ability of relative density. The Fractal mascot can move through creatures and objects as if they were difficult terrain. It takes a d10 force damage if it ends its turn inside an object. So we've got a little bit of spectral ghost kind of action going on. Action, Quantum Strike, +3 to hit, 5 feet range, 1d4 plus 1 force damage, or 2d4 plus 1 if the fractal is medium or bigger. Medium or bigger, you say, but it's small. Well, that would be its bonus action attack. Not attack, but ability. Augment. The fractal size increases by 1 category. While the fractal is medium or bigger, it makes strength checks and strength saving throws with advantage. The fractal can become no larger than huge via this bonus action. So you have a small creature that over the course of a few turns you can make huge. Now note that it says that they can become no larger via the huge by this bonus action. It specifically says by this bonus action, so you can in fact make it gargantuan. So if we just go for enlarge reduce, the growth increases by 1 size category. So you can have a fractal mascot and you can have it make itself huge, and then you could cast enlarge, which is a pretty low level spell that even Durgar get racially, and you can have a gargantuan minion. I'm not sure why they ever thought that was okay, but this is Magic the Gathering, so nothing really makes sense in terms of 5e supplements. Yeah, and then otherwise it gets the ability to shrink. And when it shrinks, if it's tiny, it makes attack rolls, dex, and dex saving throws with advantage. It can be no smaller than 1 foot in height. So you can't be sending it underneath doors, but it's still pretty darn tiny. And Inkling Mascot from Silverquill. So this is going to be your stealthier option. It's a tiny ooze, specifically. It's going to have a 10-foot movement speed, but it does have a 30-foot fly speed, and it can hover, so it can't be proned. It's going to be immune to psychic damage and blinded, charmed, deafened, exhaustion, and prone. It has 60 foot of blind sight, so that's going to be quite good for an alternative vision type. Remember, as it's find familiar, you can use your action to see through its sight instead. It has the amorphous trait, meaning that it can move through a space as narrow as an inch without squeezing. And for actions, it has Blot and Ink Spray. Blot is a melee attack, 5-foot range, a d4 +3 psychic damage. It's +5 to hit, so it's one of the higher to hits, and psychic damage is a pretty decent damage type. Useless against some things like constructs or golems, but generally speaking, it's pretty good. Ink Spray is once per day, and it's one creature within 15 feet of the use. The target must be seen on a DC 12, not Dex, Constitution saving throw, or be blinded until the end of the Inkling's next turn. So this is only one turn, and it's a DC 12 con save. Again, con typically monster strong. So in terms of blinding, was it the... Who blinded people? Oh, that was the Death Burst. Okay, so the Death Burst of the Art Elemental is going to be better at blinding people. It's got a slightly lower DC, but it's for potentially a minute. So that's something to bear in mind. The blinding was not something that I would rely on. And as a bonus action, in Dim Light or Darkness, it can take the hide action. Kind of like, I think, a Shadow is what can do that. It's got an AC of 13, 18 hit points. This is a pretty versatile one, to be honest. The Amorphous trait, the fly speed, this of all of them is probably one of the better mascots to use for typical familiar things, sneaking around and stuff. And I will throw the addendum that, whilst you can have these things attack, most of them it is not worth swapping your entire action to do so. And depending on what your martial build is, it is probably not worth swapping an attack for. But it's a thing you can do. And bear in mind, yes, one attack. So when you forego your attack, you can't make them use their other actions, only specifically attacks. So bear that in mind. Finally, the Pest mascot from Witherbloom. Hoo boy, there's a lot to this feat. Has an AC of 13, 22 hit points, it's a tiny monstrosity with a speed of 30. It's got dark vision out to 60 feet, decent passive perception of 13. Now, this one's interesting because it has a regeneration feature. It regains 5 hit points at the start of its turn if it has at least 1 hit point, and it has 22 hit points, so it's not super likely to get one-shotted. If it takes fire damage, it doesn't function. Notably, acid is not included. Fire is not that uncommon, but the fact that it's just fire means that it's more reliable than a troll's regeneration. And Spiny Hide. At the start of each of its turns, the pest deals 1d4 piercing damage to any creature grappling it or that it is grappling. For its attack, it has a +4 to hit, 5-foot range, d4 + 2 piercing damage, and now it has a thing about grappling. It is tiny, and it has a strength of 0 and no athletics proficiency. So don't expect it to grapple a lot. There are some monsters that like to grapple, but expecting them to grapple this tiny thing, meh. Overall, where would I put this? C. Now, I'm aware that the fractal mascots scaling and getting a special Find Familiar with the option of swapping between all of these whenever you have the time to cast Find Familiar, and the teleporting, all great, right? The attack action thing is not really worth much in practicality because their actions are not going to be stronger than yours. The teleporting is kind of nice, but to be honest, if I wanted a feat that let me teleport, I would take Fey Touched. And whilst getting Find Familiar as a ritual is great, getting special forms that can kind of do weird stuff and punish people when they're destroyed is nice. If I wanted to play a character with a special Find Familiar, I would play a Chain Lock where I could actually invest in it with invocations to make it more potent. Technically, you could be a Chain Lock, take this feat and still do that, but that's kind of defeating the point in my opinion. I would rather have an Imp than pretty much all of these. Imp has solid resistance and immunities, can turn invisible whenever it wants. It's even a pseudo dragon or a sprite's pretty good too. I just don't see this feat being worth the prerequisites, because you're gonna have to feat chain this. You need Strixhaven Initiate. You take this if you want the theme, and I guess it does the theme well enough, you get your mascot or whatever. Or if you have a very niche exploit in your mind, like, hey, that fractal guy, I can make him gargantuan, I can do something with that. Sure, but that's really niche. This isn't bad enough that it's a D, it gives you enough to warrant being better than that, but it certainly does not give you enough to be worth a B in my opinion. And no, I'm not salty that I just spent, I don't even know how long reading that. So that is what I thought. I don't know if half this video was just that last feat, but let me know what you think down below in the comment section. What did I get right? What did I get wrong? Where would you put stuff? While you're down there, please hit that like and subscribe button. I know YouTube has saved a lot, but it's because it really does help. We promise we wouldn't lie to you. That was me. Oh, don't look at my roll. Anyway, until next one, I've been Paul, and I'll see you at the Forge.